called you. I'll give you a 5. And over to you, Michael.
Okay, thanks, Ros. I'm Michael, I'm an addict.
Hi, Michael.
Very good to be here, but also quite anxiety-provoking. I don't know about anyone else. I've been around for a long time, but I've never really enjoyed doing shares. It's not something that I do naturally. I'm sort of using addict I was with somebody who'd like to do a lot of drugs and go off on his own. And I think that's how I am in recovery, really. I have that anxiety. So for me, I have to push myself to do this. But I never say no, if possible, to a chair, but it's not my way of being, naturally. I've been doing this for a long time. I'm 36 years. And I'll be 37 in April, if I make it. I'm 70 years old. Never thought I'd make it to this age. Yeah, I mean, I was in hospital at 18, in hospital at 21, suicide attempts to do with, couldn't cope with how I felt, couldn't cope with my head, and the answer to that was sort of try and take myself out of the picture. Seemed like a really good idea at the time, because all I wanted was peace, just wanted a bit of peace and quiet from my head, and it didn't work. You know, I got found, sectioned, and then let out again and just carried on doing the same thing. And it says in our readings about, so you know, people like us go to see psychiatrists and it doesn't help. And I was never diagnosed as an addict. Nobody ever said to me, we've got this problem. I mean, this was in the 70s. So it was very sort of different in those days. But I don't want to talk too much about my past. I want to talk about the whole thing around step 9 and making amends. I'll say what I think about this program. This program is about giving back. For me, it's about giving back everything that I hadn't found in myself, because it was all there. It was just covered up with lots of trauma and resentments and wounds from my history. And my active addiction was about robbing people and myself of everything possible. Every time I used, I robbed myself of a little bit more of my self-esteem. I was addicted to the quick fix. I really wanted to get away from me as quickly as possible. And by doing that, I lost the opportunity to find myself again. But I kept doing it because it worked for a long time. And you know, I continued searching for that sense of this is going to last forever. I wanted to find a drug that lasted forever. You just took it once and you felt great. And my friend was doing a book a few years ago, and she interviewed me for this book, and she said, you know, what did you use drugs for? And I said, all I wanted to do were 2 things. I wanted to have fun and be okay. And that was it. I loved the 70s and the early 80s because I used to go to all the clubs around the West End, and so I was a clubber. But I had to have the right type of drugs to do that. And, you know, of course, as everyone knows, the drugs stop working after a while, and you have to keep taking more and more. The progression really took hold of me. And I suppose that's when a lot of the real damage started taking place to other people. You know, I was being damaged all the time, just trying to escape my family and my childhood. But it was when I started to get into the heavier drugs, like in the 70s, freebase and really heavy heroin using. There was a lot of Chinese white and stuff coming into London, and it was great. I loved it. The stronger the drug, the more I wanted it. But the stuff you had to do to get it, sometimes, and the places you had to put yourself in to hang out with people to get it wasn't a great time. And you know, in my early years, I was, you know, from about the age of 12, I was running away from home, and I was in Soho, around Piccadilly, hanging out with all the other kids like me, all the lost kids, lost boys and girls, just looking for a mum or dad, basically, someone to take care of us. And when I found drugs, I actually did that, and I didn't need a person. That's, you know, what I had to keep on doing. But even in those early years, so much damage was done to myself and to some of the other people that I was hanging out with, other kids, you know, being in the sex industry, selling myself, all that sort of stuff. For me, that was the norm. Other people have said to me that I've sponsored have said to me they got to that many years on. I did that straight away at the beginning. And then when I found the drugs, it got easier. Anyway, so that was a big part of my wanting to make amends to myself was those early years, that 12-year-old who didn't feel he had a choice. And then through the years, I found myself, because I was never a stupid kid, I was a smart kid, and my smartness was used in trying to pull the wool over other people's eyes and to get into positions where I could get money, power, any way of getting things from other people that I didn't have to work too hard to get. So I remember I met some people in the West End, and I was on something called Black Bombers, these really strong speed, and I was gurning, it was like mental, and I chatted these two people up that wandered in off the street, and within a couple of weeks I was running their business in the King's Road in Chelsea, and really I suppose I saw that business as a way to actually get money, which wasn't mine, but it was a way of getting the money to then create more of this facade and more drugs and whatever. And that was the example, really, of what I did. If I used to go around dealers' houses later on down the years, if they, I'd find my way of making myself indispensable. So I'd become the person, I'll just go and get the door for you, babe, or whatever, and I'd let the punters in so they could get the gear. And I became one of those people. I'd do a bit of washing up. And all that sort of time, I was trying to find some way to get in, to get everyone else out of the way so I could get the gear. It was taking people hostage, basically, in a very sly, undercover way. So those are just basic sort of harms, damages to myself, to others. And then you go into the big ones, where I was, a terrible sort of... I suppose the way I used drugs, I used to inject, and so I really ruined my body. I spent a long time on crutches, a long time sort of wandering around London on these crutches. I had long hair, looked a bit like Charles Manson, it was mad. Really, really treated myself badly, and again that was all to get something into me that actually made me feel better. I've shared this many times. If somebody else had done to me what I did to me, they'd be doing at least 2 or 3 life sentences, stabbing me every day with bits of metal. It just, it wasn't on, but it's what I was only able to do. Amongst all of this, the only people that really were on the receiving end of main harms from me were the people that I was running the fashion business with. My mum was a using addict. Put us in a room, and it was like who could work out how to rob the other more quickly. So, she was often better than me, believe you me. She'd slip half a bottle of vodka or whiskey or stuff. I'd polish that off, wake up and I'd no jewellery and whatever. She'd gone down the pub and sold it. So that was, again, the norm for me. All of my family, when I ran away at 12 and later on, no one came to look for me. So there weren't necessarily too many amends to make there. I tracked one of my cousins down a few years ago, and I've shared this. It was a really awful situation. A lot of people in the rooms told me, Michael, you're an addict, you probably got it wrong, you think in a particular way, and I'm sure your family loved you more than you think. Anyway, I tracked this cousin down, and we met up. I was only there for half an hour before she hit me for a loan. And I said, well, I haven't seen you for 30 odd years. And she said, well, so you're not going to give me some money? And I said, no. And she went, well, fuck off, you puff. and so that was my best cousin. That was my one I felt closest to. So I left there sort of feeling very, very happy, because I came back to the rooms and told everyone, you were all wrong, and I was right. And so, that's my family, basically. So in my mind, NA is my family. So that's why I've stayed in the middle and been so staunch about being part of the fellowship and the unity. All of that stuff's really important to me, because I never had it growing up. So all the stuff I've learned about getting close to people and intimacy and all that has all been part of one big amend to do with coming from a family that never showed me how to do it in a way that actually was healthy or balanced. my family just showed love in a very, very damaging way. They couldn't help it, but that was their only way. So when I first got clean, and I always share this, I got clean in April, and that last Christmas was an absolute nightmare. This time of year, I don't know for other junkies and that, it's a really tough time, especially if you're a street junkie like I was. And you're just hobbling around desperately trying to get some money before the big freeze kicks in, or even the dealers have mothers that suddenly turn up and you can't get any gear and whatever. It's mad. And but I remember my best Christmas before I got clean was in 1987. I got arrested for shoplifting a week before Christmas, and all the screws in the prisons were on strike. So they shipped all the people out of London to holding cells in different places, and I went to Norwich, which I've never been to since, but I should go there. I think it might be quite a nice place. But anyway, so there was me and 6 other guys, and we're behind these bars, and we all had our little cells, like 2 or 3 of us in a cell. And we were there for 3 weeks. There were 3 rusters, me, a gypsy, and I can't remember the other guy, some middle-class guy who got caught for something or other. Anyway, the police were absolutely brilliant. They just got the local doctor in, he gave us loads of drugs, I had loads of sleeping pills. Even the doctor did something illegal, he gave me some Ficeptone to take the cluck off from the heroin. So I got loads of drugs, I was really in my element. And we were all there on Christmas Day. The police brought in 2 or 3 bottles of whiskey, and we got completely paralytic. And the enduring memory I have is of me with these rusters singing along to The Sound of Music, because they had the TV on in the room and in this cell, and we were just sitting there singing, and it was like the best Christmas I'd ever had in my life. And I think when I got clean, I've had a few that have equalled that without the booze. But I had such a good time that year. And then, of course, I came back to London, but I think it was the beginning of the end at that point, and I started to get a sense that my time was up. And I was offered a place outside London for a month or so, and I took it. And then I came back to London, that was in '89, and I haven't used since. There's something really important about that particular part of my life, because it was as if it was touch and go whether I lived or died. I'd already had the suicide attempts, but this time it felt like I didn't have a choice in this, like the candle flame was going out and I didn't have a choice. And suddenly I felt, people talk about having a spiritual awakening. I feel that I got that spiritual awakening at that point. Something happened that awoke my spirit, and I thought, I really want to do something about this. I dragged my feet a bit, but I finally got it, and here I am today. And for me, this has probably been the best thing I've ever done in my whole life. I can't imagine where I'd be. I probably would be dead at this age, trying to hustle around. I wouldn't last a minute. But I remember getting clean and absolutely being terrified of people, really frightened of people, because I'd spent my life it was like putting on a suit of armour, my drug using, and suddenly I took the suit of armour off, and I was sitting in meetings. I was so self-obsessed, I couldn't go to the toilet. If I got a spot on the back of my neck, I couldn't sit at the front of the meeting because I thought everyone would be looking at my spot. Things like that. It was so awful. And but it was about putting one foot in front of the other. Anyway, I haven't talked about step 8 or 9, have I? I've just realised, sorry about this. So for me, I've just stuck with it. And like I said at the beginning, this whole programme for me is about giving back. It's about not robbing people. It's about giving self-esteem, self-love, self-care, and in turn being able to give those to others. And sometimes you give it to others and it builds it in yourself. It can be inside out or outside in sometimes. But most of my amends have been about taking care of myself. That primarily is about me. But my amends list was broken into those that I needed to make amends to and those that I might have to put on a shelf because they might stab me or something. some people that I've robbed, dealers, people like that, and my sponsor said to me, there's a little bit that says, except when to do so would injure them or others. He said, you're likely to get a good stabbing or something if you go around that person's house. So I thought, okay. But I remember in my early years, I made an amend to someone, a really close female friend of mine, and she used to put me up now and again. And I remember I was a bit short of money, as I always was, and she had this pen in her drawer. And I thought, oh, she won't miss this. And it was one of those Mont Blanc pens, which are worth quite a lot. And I sold it for a £10 bag. And years later, when I got clean, I told her. And up until that point, she'd never thought it was me because she really cared for me and really thought I was a good guy. And she's never spoken to me since. Because what I didn't realise, that pen was the only thing she had of her dead father. And I took it and sold it for £10. And she never forgave me, and I understand that. You know, I have to live with that. But I learnt my lesson. I just thought, you know, sometimes you rush out to make these amends, especially without talking it through with the sponsor. And you can sometimes create more harm than good. So since then, I've always been able to sort of sit down with someone and go through my amends and just think about potentials and possibilities and options. And my amends list was filled with dead people. My mother had died of her addiction in the 80s, and she died with nothing in Stockwell. She was an old alcoholic and in her mid-50s, but she looked about 90 at that point. She was in a really sad state, and when I first got clean, it took me a long time to sort of come to some state of forgiveness with her. But she had the same condition as I had, so if I could forgive myself, I needed to think about forgiving her, which I do now. When I think of her, I think very fondly, and I feel very sad that she never got a chance to get clean and to do something with her life, but it doesn't always work like that. So a lot of my amends has been about writing letters, going to cemeteries or places where I feel safe, and sitting down and reading these letters out. And I remember the first one I did to my mum. She was cremated over in, where is it? Over in South East London somewhere. And I went to the cemetery and I sat there and I read this letter out and I was in bits. And I remember I'd arranged with my sponsor to meet him in a meeting that afternoon, and I went to meet him and I was crying my eyes out. I was in such a state, I could feel it now. And I said to my sponsor, I said, it feels like the cement that's held the bricks of me together is gone. I feel like I'm just going to fall apart. And what I realised was all this grief and sadness, all the stuff I'd held on to for years was what held me together. But by letting it go, I was actually becoming more held together without all of these things. But I just didn't know that. And that's what recovery means for me, being able to sort of let go of these things. And sometimes there's certain people, I remember I had to write a letter to someone who I owed a lot of money to. And she said to me, if you ever come near me, or I see you, or I hear about you, I will hit you over the head with something really heavy. Fuck off, basically. And I have to accept that. There's some people just don't want the amends because I hurt them so much. You know, and you know, this is one of my big regrets, I guess, that, you know, I don't think I'm a bad guy. I don't think it's bad if you've got, you know, the disease of addiction, but I think I did bad things, and that's what I need to make the amends for. And I'm really grateful that I've made as many of the amends that I can make. And so for me now, it's about being able to live life with a sense of dignity, going out into the world every day, and just thinking about how I can put things out into the world that are going to help people rather than take away. If I see, say, a single mum with the pram trying to get up the tube steps, I'll help. If tomorrow I don't have the family and I'm going to have a quiet day, but there's a gang of us in my area, all about my age, and there's some older people, older than us, that don't have any family left. So we've all clubbed together and we're going to cook Sunday sort of Christmas meal for these older people, and we're going to deliver it. And so I've made a trifle, because half of them haven't got any teeth. So I've made a trifle and I've got it home in the fridge. And I'm going to go around tomorrow. Someone's done a turkey, someone's done some other meats. And we're just going to, like, eat with his older people, because it's about community. You know, I hope at some point when I'm that age, someone will do that for me. You know, that's the reality, that, you know, we have a very short time on this planet, and so it is for me about making it something worthwhile. Trying to think what else to say really about this. I mean, without the steps, I don't know where I'd be, and the principles that underlie each step. And you know, they often say in literature about they are in the right place, and I think step 8 and 9 are definitely in the right place. As I said earlier, I tried to make an amend before I was ready, and I really messed up big time. So for me, it's always important to actually follow the way the steps go. I don't have a lot to say, you know. I'm here, I'm happy, you know, life is okay. I still work, I've got my health as good as it can be. I take care of myself, you know, I eat well, and I try and support as many people as I can, because I took away from so many people. It's important for me to give back as much as I can. But, you know, I've learned a lot around codependency over the years, and I realise because I feel all this sort of Catholic guilt, I'm a recovering Catholic, so all this Catholic guilt, it doesn't mean I have to do people and sell myself short. It's really important for me, part of my amends to myself is to have boundaries and to know it's okay to say no. I don't always have to rush in and fight fires. Sometimes people have their own buckets of water, I don't have to do it for them. Anyway, I don't think I'm going to say anything else. I hope this has made some sense for some people. And if you are new around, please stick around and let things happen. And I hope you have a good Christmas tomorrow, everyone, and do take care. Thank you.
Thanks, Michael.